Every year, there are 700,000 little girls are forced into child marriage in the Middle East and North Africa. Girls aged 15 to 17 make up 4% of every 20 girls, and in every 10 girls between the ages of 15 to 19, 11% are either currently married or married forcefully in Egypt. So does in Yemen 32% of girls who are not mature enough are married and still getting married, and so are in other Islamic countries. If we talk about the rape and abuse cases, that rate is pretty high. This is my topic today. Why the child marriage and child abuse rate is so high in the Middle East and in Islamic countries. Well, you know the answer. The Prophet of Islam himself engaged in child marriage and taught his followers to practice it. It's also taught by the God of Islam that child marriage and intercourse with children is lawful for Muslim men to practice it. In this section, we will look at the teachings and doings of Muhammad related to child marriage and what the Quran actually says about it. Let's dive into it. In this first section, we will look at the Quran, tafsirs, and hadiths about the teachings of child marriage and child intercourse in Islam. Hadiths are the sayings and doings of Muhammad, and tafsirs are the commentary of the Quran by prominent Islamic scholars. We read in the Quran, Surah 65, verse 4, quote, "As for your women past the age of menstruation, in case you do not know, their waiting period is 3 months, and those who have not menstruated yet. As for those who are pregnant, their waiting period ends with delivery. And whoever is mindful of Allah, He will make their matters easy for them." End quote. Now, I want you to understand this chapter is called at-talaq or divorce, so it's talking about whom you can actually divorce. The waiting period here is the period or a time gap after divorce and remarriage. It's also called the iddah. Now, what does that mean when it says, "And those who have not menstruated yet, that their waiting period should be 3 months"? Let's read the following tafsirs. This is according to Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Surah 65, verse 4, quote, "Allah the Exalted clarifies the waiting period of the woman in menopause, and that is the one whose menstruation has stopped due to her older age. Her iddah is 3 months instead of the 3 monthly cycles for those who menstruate, which is based upon the ayah in Surat Al-Baqarah, C2:228. The same for the young who have not reached the years of menstruation. Their iddah is 3 months like those in menopause," and end quote. Now, keep in mind here, Ibn Kathir says the same for the young who have not reached the years of menstruation. Their iddah is 3 months like those in menopause. So, when it says those who have not yet menstruated, it's actually referring to the girls who are prepubescent and who have not yet menstruated because of their young age. This is clear that their iddah is 3 months, and iddah comes after divorce. Before divorce, what comes in? Marriage. So, Muslims can actually marry the prepubescent girls and divorce them, and those prepubescent girls will remain unmarried for 3 months, and then they can get married again after the end of 3 months. Tafsir al-Jalalayn, Surah 65, verse 4, quote, "And as for those of your women who read alaf or al-ai in both instances, no longer expect to menstruate. If you have any doubts about their waiting period, their prescribed waiting period shall be 3 months, and also for those who have not yet menstruated because of their young age, their period shall also be 3 months. Both cases apply to other than those whose spouses have died. For these latter, their period is prescribed in the verse, they shall wait by themselves for 4 months and 10 days. Quran chapter 2 verse 234. And those who are pregnant, their term, the conclusion of their prescribed waiting period if divorced or if their spouses be dead, shall be when they deliver. And whoever fears God, He will make matters ease for him, in this world and in the hereafter. Now, the same thing in this tafsir when it says, and also for those who have not yet menstruated because of their young age, their period shall also be 3 months. It's referring to the prepubescent girls who haven't yet menstruated because of their young age, that Muslim men can marry them and divorce them, and the waiting for those prepubescent girls before the remarriage. According to Tafsir al-Sadi, Surah 65, verse 4, quote, "And those who have not menstruated, meaning the young girls who have not yet experienced menstruation, and the adult women who have not menstruated at all. They are like those who are uncertain. Their waiting period is 3 months. So, Al-Sadi is also saying that Muslim men can marry prepubescent girls who haven't yet reached the years of menstruation because they are so young. Muslims can marry those prepubescent girls and can divorce them, and the iddah of those girls would be 3 months before remarriage. According to Tafsir al-Qurtubi Surah 65, verse 4, quote, his saying, exalted be he, and those who have despaired of menstruation among your women, concerning the period between divorce and reconciliation for women who menstruate. They had already known the waiting period for those who have reached menopause. The verse introduces the waiting period for those who do not experience menstruation. Abu Uthman Umar ibn Salim said, when the waiting period for women was revealed in Surah al-Baqarah concerning the divorced and the deceased husbands, my father Kabi said, O Messenger of Allah, some people are saying that there are women who have been left out of mention, the young and the pregnant. Then the verse, and those who have despaired, was revealed. An end quote. Al-Qurtubi is saying the same thing, that Muslim men can marry prepubescent girls and then divorce them, and the waiting period of those prepubescent girls would be 3 months before the remarriage. Finally, according to Tafsir al-Bagawi, Surah 65 verse 4, quote, and those who did not menstruate yet, meaning the young girls who have not yet menstruated, their waiting period is also 3 months, an end quote. This is pretty clear that a Muslim can marry a prepubescent girl and divorce them. So, basically, the Quran Surah 65 verse 4 that we read, it's actually allowing the divorce of prepubescent girls that they are not menstruated yet. Hence, it proves the Quran allows to marry the girls who are prepubescent. Now, Muslims would say, yes, it's allowed to marry the prepubescent girls, but it's not allowed to have intercourse with them until they become mature. To refute this statement, I want to show you in the Quran that the Quran itself allows to have intercourse with those girls who are prepubescent or haven't yet reached the years of menstruation because of their young age. Let's read Surah 33 verse 49, quote, O you who have believed, when you marry believing women and then divorce them before you have touched them, i.e., consummated the marriage, then there is not for you any waiting period to count concerning them. So provide for them and give them a gracious release, an end quote. Now, I want you to read this part clearly. Divorce them before you have touched them, i.e., consummated the marriage. Then there is not for you any waiting period to count concerning them. What we understood by reading this passage is that the divorce is only for those who had intercourse according to Surah 33, verse 49. This is also supported by Al-Tabari, who I left his tafsir on Surah 65 verse 4 for last. So I can pair it with Surah 33 verse 49. Al-Tabari implies you can consummate the marriage with prepubescent girls. Read carefully. Tafsir Al-Tabari, Surah 65 verse 4, quote, the interpretation of the verse, and those of your women as have passed the age of monthly courses, for them the iddah prescribed period, if you have doubt about their periods, is 3 months, and for those who have no courses, i.e. they are still immature, their iddah prescribed period is 3 months likewise. He said, the same applies to the iddah for girls who do not menstruate because they are too young if their husbands divorce them after consummating the marriage with them, an end quote. Now, here you can actually see that you can divorce the prepubescent girls after having intercourse with them. Because if you divorce them without touching them, or if you divorce prepubescent girls without having sex with them, then there is no waiting period or iddah for them. So in order to have the iddah of 3 months, or in order to have the waiting period of 3 months, you have to have intercourse with them. So, according to Quran Surah 65 verse 4, you can actually marry, have intercourse and divorce, and can remarry the prepubescent girls. Now, there are hadiths where Muhammad recommended or encouraged his followers to marry immature girls or prepubescent girls. We read in Sahih al-Bhukhari 5080 narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, when I got married, Allah's Messenger said to me, what type of lady have you married? I replied, I have married a matron. He said, why? Don't you have a liking for the virgins and for fondling them? Jabir also said, Allah's Messenger said, why didn't you marry a young girl so that you might play with her and she with you? Sunan an-Nasa'i 3262. It was narrated from Ibn Abbas that the Messenger of Allah said, a previously married woman has more right to decide about herself with regard to marriage than her guardian, and an orphan girl should be consulted with regard to marriage, and her permission is her silence. Now, orphans in Islam are only considered orphans if they're prepubescent. You're no longer considered an orphan once you reach the Islamic legal age where you get your inheritance, if it exists, and legal obligations will be imposed since you'll be considered an adult. Muhammad himself married a child and consummated the marriage when Aisha was still prepubescent. Sahih al-Bukhari 5133 narrated Aisha that the Prophet, married her when she was 6 years old, and he consummated his marriage when she was 9 years old, and then she remained with him for 9 years, i.e., till his death. Muhammad himself married a child who was playing with the dolls and had intercourse with her when she was still immature. According to Islam, Muhammad is the role model, so him marrying Aisha is an example for Muslims to marry and have intercourse with prepubescent girls just as their prophet did. Now, there are a few objections where Muslims try to convince that Islam doesn't allow or teach child marriage or child intercourse. Let's see them one by one. The first objection is some Muslims really try to deny those tafsirs and they try to establish their own interpretations. They often try to say, where does it say children? It just says those who did not menstruate. It can be adult women who stopped menstruating. Our response would be to looking at the Arabic phrase. Now, if you don't read Arabic, let me make it clear for you. The relevant /highlighted phrase says, Lam yahidna. Wallahi yoisna mina almahidamin nisoikum aini tabtum fa ada tahana thalathachu ashurin wallahi lam yahidna wayalachu amalia jalahana and yadoayana hamlahunawamin yataki allaha yaja al lahu min amrahi yusra. Lam, in the Arabic, can function as a way to say something didn't happen yet but will happen in the future, not yet. And it can also function as something that doesn't happen, not. However, yahidna, the word used to refer to menstruation, here is in past tense, proving it's the first usage. If it's the second usage it would be, and those who do not menstruated, which makes it incoherent. Since it's past tense, it proves lam is used in the first sense I mentioned, not yet. So it would be like this, and those who have not menstruated yet or those who have not yet menstruated. Second objection. Some Muslims try to say it says women in the verse, so it cannot be about children in Surah 65 verse 4. But that's actually the lack of knowledge on Quranic terminology. Now, here I have, as you can see, I highlighted the phrase in Arabic and in English. Now let's look at another verse that uses the same phrase, which is Surah 2 verse 187. The word is translated as your women. But when it says your women, in the context of this verse, it's talking about wives. Some translations also say wives for clarity, such as Quran translation by Yusuf Ali. Meaning in Surah 65 verse 4, when the Quran says your women, it's talking about wives in general, not specifically adult women. The same way I can go in a room full of women and children and say, hey guys, want to play poker? As an invitation to everyone, including women. Plus, we know Muhammad married prepubescent Aisha, who was just 6 years old, so child marriage is allowed anyway.